This anime opens by showing a boy who is looking for someone. Not long after that, a woman was pointing a gun at someone. The victim's name was Asaka, and the boy's name was Yogiri. Then when the woman threatened to kill Asaka, she suddenly fell and immediately fainted at that place. Yogiri immediately hugged Asaka and invited him to go home. Then the scene changes. We show a woman waking a man. The man who was being woken up asked whether the person who woke him up was named Asaka. But apparently, the woman's name was Denora. At that time, Denora was annoyed because Yogiri called her name wrong. Then Denora at that time pointed to the place where other students had been slaughtered because there was a very ferocious monster attack destroying their bus. However, Yogiri's attitude looked indifferent. Then he took a mic and threw it at the monster. The wayphone monster was hit by a throw from Yogiri until it was knocked out. The monster then approached the two of them and opened its mouth, which was filled with fire. Denora, who was frightened, immediately hugged Yogiri's body. But suddenly the monster fell. After hearing Yogiri's words, the monster was suddenly killed on the spot. Denora, who woke up, was confused about what had actually happened. But Yogiri instead took out his smartphone and played games at that time. Denora, who saw this, was angry. Why was she able to play games when this incident occurred? Because of that, Yogiri immediately closed his cell phone and asked what really happened. Denora then explained everything to Yogiri. At that time, they were taking part in a tourist activity, and when their bus passed through a tunnel, they arrived in the Isekai world. In the midst of the confusion, a woman appeared named Shion. She was a sage. Seeing this, their annoyed teacher immediately stood up and tried to stop the woman. But surprisingly, she immediately used her magic and made the teacher immediately faint. Shion turned out to be a very sadistic figure. In fact, to show her strength, Shion even killed a bus driver at that place. Then Shion explained that they were all called to the Isekai to become sage candidates because this world is ruled by sages. Shion then stretched out her hand and pointed her hand at all the students on the bus, which made most of the students emit light, but not all of them emitted light. Shion explains that he has implemented a system called Battle Song. For students who believe, they can see a tab that is in front of their eyes. They are then given 1 month to become stronger and become a sage. When Denora asked why she didn't have a status tab like the others, Shion answered that some people just weren't talented at being sages in this world. Shion then asked Denora to just give up. Shion even said that those who couldn't become sages would become fuel for themselves. The first mission they will carry out is only 1 hour away, and Shion says don't be defeated. After telling them all, Shion immediately disappeared. When Shion left, a student named Suguru Yazaki said to the other students, they had no choice but to defeat the wayphone monster, which would appear in 1 hour, and provide status information from the other students. At that time, Yogiri was called by his friend Takatou. Then Suguru asked students who did not have status not to follow them because they would only be a burden to their other colleagues, and they would be used as sacrifices to save other students. In other words, the other students would leave the 4 of them. Even Denora, who heard this, was very surprised, because her best friend, Makochi, also agreed with Suguru's strategy. At that time, a wyvern appeared right after their friends had left that place, and then attacked 2 of Denora's colleagues when they were slaughtered there. Yogiri then thought about how to charge the battery in another world, which made Denora feel annoyed, because Yogiri was still thinking about the game. After they got out of the bus, they then saw 3 students flying towards them. Surprisingly, Denora was able to see him even though he was still too far away. Casually, Yogiri said, how about we just kill the 3 of them? After all, they have all abandoned us, which means they are the same as making us sacrifices to be thrown away. It was discovered that their purpose in coming was to turn the remaining students into zombies, and Denora said that she understood why their friends had left us. Higashida immediately threw a fireball and blew up the mountain to scare Yogiri and Denora. At that time, they also threatened Denora to become theirs. Yogiri then pointed at Higashida and said, die. At first, they laughed at those words, thinking that Yogiri was afraid of them and couldn't say anything else. But suddenly, surprisingly, Haishida died instantly at that place. Yogiri told him that he died because of his order. So when Yogiri orders someone to die, then that person will definitely die. And at that time, Yogiri asked them to obey his words. But when one of the students moved, Yogiri ordered that student to die and left one student alone. Yogiri then said that this was his power, and the people in that place were definitely dead. Haishida's friends tried to heal them, but unfortunately, the healing magic failed. Yogiri then said that his ability was to kill instantly, and if Yogiri thought of someone to kill, then that person would definitely die immediately. Even when he wanted to kill Yogiri, he could tell their intentions even though he still pretended to be kind. This made him very afraid. Yogiri then asked why they were always arrogant, just because they were given the power of this gift. He then explained everything to Yogiri, because in fact it was not their first time coming to another world, so they had actually been tasked with defeating the Demon King. Even though the time in the other world is long, the time in the real world only takes a few hours. He then begged for forgiveness so that his life would be saved. Denora, who saw this, also did not feel sorry. At that time, Higashida's friend took out a necklace-shaped object, which could make him an obedient servant. He immediately put on the necklace and made them his masters. When Denora asked him to move away, the necklace suddenly strangled him. He then told Denora that Denora could give the position of master to someone else. Denora immediately handed over the position to Yogiri. Then Yogiri said that he would not kill him. Hearing this, he felt happy because Yogiri didn't kill him. But at that time, Yogiri pointed to the forest and saw many monsters in that place. Yogiri asked him to wait there. Even though he wanted to refuse the order, because of the necklace, he couldn't refuse at all. Then Yogiri also asked to leave his valuables behind and told him to cover up the secret about the two of them. Danora then asked Yogiri if this was her choice. Yogiri answered that they didn't know when she would betray them both. So Yogiri decided to leave her. Seeing Yogiri, who was still protecting Denora, at that moment Denora became embarrassed, even though in fact they had never spoken alone. Then Denora asked why he was still protecting her, but Yogiri didn't know what to answer. Denora said there must be a reason if Yogiri would definitely leave her without having to protect herself. Yogiri, who heard this, began to think that those were the right words, but because Yogiri had no reason. He started thinking because when the monster attacked, Denora hugged him. For that reason, Yogiri wants to protect Denora in the future. Tears, because of Yogiri's words, Denora's face immediately turned red with embarrassment.
私はどうなの？守ろうと思ったのはというのもなんだけどさ。なんかあるでしょ。何か心当たりが。守ろうと思ったのは。ここまでして守ろうと。なんでだろうね。私のことが気になってて。え？何か。壇ノ浦さんに抱きつかれ。おっぱいが柔らかかったから。
The scene moves to a royal castle, where Sean is seen hugging her doll. Then he was visited by someone named Yoichi. He gave a report to Sean about the sage candidate. At that time, Cheyenne was confused about why the wyvern dragon suddenly died like that. Yoichi explained that 4 people died in the incident, and Shion assumed that they were the people who had been sacrificed. However, Yoichi said that among the 4 people, 2 of them were power owners, who heard that was shocked about the 2 people who had the power. And what was worse was that they died without any warning. For that reason, Yoichi felt certain that the cause of all this was the instant date. But at that time, Shin handed the case over to Yoichi because he didn't want to worry about it. And finally, episode 1 ends here. This is part 2 of my recap on my instant death ability is so overpowered. You can watch the previous parts with the link in the description below at the end of the last episode. The anime opens by showing Yogiri and Danora arriving at the royal castle. However, there were several guards that they couldn't understand at that time, and therefore they were told to wait outside for a while. Not long after, someone came to pick them up. His name is Masayuko. At that time, he used the same language as the 2 of them. Yogiri then asked Masayuko several things. However, because the response was not good, they then left that place. But Masayuko said that he didn't mind letting Danora stay at his place, but they immediately refused and left Masayuko. As they travel, they begin to realize that the system of this fantasy world is extraordinary with its mixture of races and humans. Suddenly, a half-human girl came and said whether they were candidates for Sage. The girl's name is Mairyu. At that time, Mairyu offered free help to them and would help them wholeheartedly. The reason he wanted to help the two of them was because Mairyu really wanted to get to know the person who would become the sage candidate. In the end, they both agreed and took Mairyu as their guide. Then they went to the store to buy new clothes. But suddenly, everything doesn't go according to plan. This is Mairyu's trap. It can be seen that many bandits have surrounded them, and all this is because of Mairyu's actions. It is known that the bandits' goal was not just money, but they also targeted sage candidates who were not talented. Yogiri, who heard this, said that if your goal was clear, everything was clear, and because he already knew the bandits' goal, he didn't hesitate to kill them all. Initially, the bandits underestimated Yogiri and laughed at him because he did not have the gift of the sage. Even Mairyu also underestimated Yogiri and said that he would not be able to win against the bandits. Yogiri then said casually that everyone here had to die, and right at that moment behind Yogiri, the bandit suddenly died instantly. However, Yogiri's actions didn't stop there. He immediately ordered the others to half-die. But unfortunately, the half-dead effect of Yogiri alone is very terrible. Yogiri also ordered several things such as a sprained ankle, paralyzing his hands, and also paralyzing his eyes. But some of them were also killed at that time, because the effect of the Yogiri's power was too terrible. Everyone died instantly on the spot.
とりあえず今何を半分死ね右足首左腕
高藤君
眼球効率が悪いな
Seeing Yogiri's terrible power, Mairyu became afraid at that time. Then he begged Yogiri for forgiveness that he had a younger brother at home who was waiting for him to come home. But for Yogiri, that is not a reason for them to sell other people. Yogiri then ordered them both to die right then and there. But apparently there was no effect. Because of that, the two of them tried to escape from that place too. When they were too far from Yogiri, suddenly they both died in that place. Then when they wanted to leave, suddenly a guard arrived who immediately stopped Yogiri and Danira. One of the guards named Edgar asked why this could happen. Yogiri then explained that everyone suddenly fainted instantly. Edgar said that he had just seen everyone faint when they wanted to attack Yogiri. They also underestimated Yogiri and Danira because they did not have the strength like the other sage candidates. Because of this, they couldn't blame Yogiri and Danira for creating this mess. Then, one of them apologized to Yogiri for his captain's rude actions. Then at that time, Yogiri asked for directions about lodging. Not long after, they arrived at a very magnificent inn. After finding accommodation, they immediately rested. Then the scene changes. Danira, who is thinking about Yogiri, suddenly appears a ghostly woman at her place. Seeing the ghost, Danira immediately assumed that it was her brother because he had a face that was very similar to her brother. However, it turns out that the ghost is Moko Danmora, who is the wife of the founder of the Danira family. She is the guardian spirit of Danira herself. The reason Moko didn't appear in the first place was because he was very afraid of the power of Yogiri. In other words, it turns out that the power of Yogiri has an effect on even spirits. Because of that, Moko told Danira to tell Yogiri that he would not harm anything. Danira also asked Moko many questions about what he did to protect Danira. Based on Moko's explanation, he can protect Danira from any attacks other than physical attacks. Even the installation of Danira's gift was not installed because of Moko's actions. He had prevented the installation of Cheyenne's gift. But because Danira was upset at that time, Moko then explained everything to Danira. Even though the gift basically gives power, it is something suspicious that is embedded in a person's body. With the gift, a person will be under the control of the sage and including his own life. Because of this, Moko then stopped giving gifts to Danira. The next day, Danira met Yogiri. Here, Danira also asked Yogiri if they would follow the others. But suddenly, a woman named Celestina came. He had searched for their classmates' location and how to get there. Not only that, Celestina also helped with other needs and provided tickets to the capital. Long story short, they then continued their journey by train. Danira also seemed to have explained about Moko to Yogiri. The scene then moves. At that moment, we are shown Yogiri, who gives the explanation explained by Celestina previously, that her friends are heading to the ancient forest for training. And when Danira asked who Celestina really was, suddenly something happened that shocked the place. A train carriage was suddenly destroyed, and at that moment, Yogiri immediately protected Danira. Then the scene changes to show Edgar. It turns out that among all of them there is one who can survive Yogiri's attack. Because at that time Yogiri only blinded his eyes, this made the person unable to be interrogated. Then a sage took out its eyes and gave healing to the creature. The sage is named Len. However, because he didn't get any effect, Len immediately took out his vampire fangs and bit his prisoner. His captive then turned into his bloodline, but still he couldn't get him the information he wanted. While the others were thinking about Yogiri, a hero suddenly arrived at that place, but the scene then shifts to the train. At that time, information was heard saying that there was a sage who was facing the aggressor in that place, and at that time, there was an aggressor who was fighting against a sage. The battle looked very fierce. Then Danara said to Yogiri, why not just get rid of them? Because they were blocking Yogiri's journey. But Yogiri explains that that means he can kill everyone who gets in his way, including people who are walking in front of his face. Yogiri then emphasized to Danoa, even though he could kill everyone instantly, he would not kill people who had done nothing wrong or were not targeting him. But suddenly, an aggressor appeared right in front of them. And at that time, a sage then chased him while furious. The sage is named Santaru. Then he launched an attack on the aggressor, without paying attention to the people around him.
一定の基準を設けて攻めてるわけじゃないから気にし。あ、ごめん。逃げてんじゃねえ。ほら。
The scene then moves to where Len is seen, who is currently fighting a hero. When the hero launched his attack, Len received the attack directly and injured several parts of his body. However, because he is a vampire sage type, all his wounds can be healed directly. Len then asked the hero why he launched an attack on a sage, because a hero's job is to destroy the Demon King. The hero's name is Ian. Ian seemed very angry with Len, because he knew all the bad plans the sages had. At that time, Ian immediately launched a big attack, using the Holy Sword Cartina to create a big explosion in the castle. At that time, Ian was sure that Len had died there. However, the next scene shows Yogiri again, and you can see that many people are dead around Yogiri. Then Yogiri asked the sage who had previously launched the brutal attack, because they were also affected by the attack. However, Santaro instead behaves impolitely in front of Yogiri and deifies himself as someone who must be respected by everyone. Because he was annoyed by Santaro's actions, Yogiri killed him instantly. The aggressor who saw that then said to Yogiri, there were several things he wanted to talk to Yogiri about. Then the scene changes to show Len, who turns out to be still alive. Len also says to him whether your lover's name is Adele. Ian, who heard this, was shocked because Len was still alive, but Len said to Ian that he couldn't possibly die from such a trivial attack. Hearing Len's words, at that time Ian asked to be killed because he failed to kill Len. But because Len had no intention of killing the hero, he immediately threw him away from that place.
アリエル。そのアリエルというのは
どうやって逃れた。
どうせ死なないのだ。このくらいで死ねるなら
殺せ。
逃れてなどいない。殺す気も起きない。
On the other hand, Yogiri was negotiating with Aggressor. At that time, Aggressor asked Yogiri whether there was anything he could give Yogiri to repay Yogiri's good deeds. Yogiri then answered him, "Can you help me to return to my old world?" At that time, the aggressor explained that he only knew how to return to the aggressor's own world, but bringing them was still impossible because it was not the aggressor's original form. Plus, Yogiri was also said to be very dangerous by the aggressor, which made it impossible for him to take Yogiri. Because of this, Mako also gave them advice. The scene then returns to showing Eldgard, who at that time was shocked to see the sage Sanryu dead in that place. We are then shown to a place where Sage Shion and other sages are discussing. They talked about Yogiri and Danara, who managed to kill a sage named Santaru. They were then confused because Yogiri's power was probably instant death, while Santaru should have defense immunity from instant death. For the sages, their goal is to expel the aggressors, but they also cannot ignore people who are capable of killing sages. However, Shion didn't allow anyone to dare touch the person who had become her sage candidate. But Shion told Len she didn't mind if Len wanted to get rid of the darkness. And after that, Shion then disappeared from that place. Then Len immediately summoned his aide, Misayuki, to lead the attack on Hanabusa. That was because ordinary troops could not possibly survive. Misayuki, who heard that, said that Len only wanted Hanabusa's destruction. But at time, Len was just silent. The scene then returns to showing Yogiri. At that time, they were seen resting somewhere and separated from the aggressor. Suddenly, Moko came back and gave the katana to Denora. The katana was obtained from the robot's body part. And finally, episode 2 ends here. This is part 3 of my recap on my instant death ability is so overpowered. You can watch the previous parts with the link in the description below at the end of the last episode. While on the way, many monsters were seen attacking Yogiri and Danora. At that time, Danora asked Yogiri the reason, but at that time, Yogiri asked Danora not to worry about that. And because Danora was worried about the limitations of Yogiri's powers, Yogiri said that his powers had no limits and could be used as he pleased. Then they arrived at a city that looked very modern and saw a very large hotel there. They then decided to spend the night at that place. When they arrived at the place, they saw someone greet them. That person was named Tachibana, who was a classmate of their previous class. It can be seen that Tachibana, who at that time had several slaves at that place, all of them seemed very obedient to Tachibana. They then introduced themselves to Danora and Yogiri based on Tachibana's orders. The 5th is named Erica, the 4th is named Stepani, the 3rd is named Chelsea, the 2nd is named Euphemia, and the 1st is named Riza. Riza is also the captain of these slaves. Because they were all making uncomfortable faces at Danora, Danora felt annoyed with all of them for being too aggressive towards her. And after that, something ridiculous happened. Tachibana then asked Danora to become his concubine. Danora, who heard that, became confused, but Tachibana continued saying that if Danora was worried about Yogiri, he also didn't mind making her his slave. In fact, Yogiri could have killed Tachibana straight away, but Yogiri thought he even lost his intention to kill when he saw a person who had no sense like Tachibana.
いやー、すまない。しばらく黙っててくれ。つって俺たちを置いていった力を手に入れたのか知らん。
バナ君はもともとこんな過剰だったの。
ずっと面白いところだ。ここで会ったのも何かの愛人にならない？
は？
本来男は受け入れ。
逆に面白くなってきた。
The reason Tachibana is confident is because he is in one of the strongest classes called Dominator. It can control low-level enemies as its own slaves. At that time, Tachibana explained to Danora about what had happened to his classmates. When they were gathered, Otori, who had a consultant class, met Tachibana and explained several situations to him, that Tachibana had the potential to be closest to becoming a sage. Because based on Otori's explanation, when Tachibana has slaves even though they are at level 1, those slaves will give XP to Tachibana even though Tachibana does not take any action. Otori also explained the reason he said this to Tachibana. Not for anything, but just to be safe so that they don't become livestock when not a single sage has been created. This is an Otori survival strategy, and for that reason why Tachibana is currently abandoning his friends. Yogiri, who heard that, also understood what Tachibana intended. Seeing Danora, who at that time rejected him, Tachibana said to Danora that he could think about the answer later. And after that, Tachibana left Danora and Yogiri. The scene then moves to another location where Len is seen, who is facing the aggressor. As a vampire sage, Len has immortal strength with extraordinary recovery abilities. However, the battle had not yet been shown, and the scene moved again to show Danora and Yogiri, who are still resting. Danora was bored at that time because it was the 3rd day that they hadn't done anything. But suddenly Danora was confused when she saw a cloud of smoke that was clumping right in the city, and there was a very big commotion in that place. It turned out to be an attack from Len's previous troops, who were tasked with immediately moving to the city of Hanabusa. The leader was named Masayuki, who was leading the immortal troops from the undead unit. And after that, Mako Mukyo explained everything to Danora, that they actually had the smell of a corpse. Hearing this, Danora felt confused as to why humans died in this world too easily. Then we are shown a person who is sneaking into the room. It turns out that the Mokomoko is very useful for Danora. Because at that time, Mokomoko said to Danora that there was someone who was watching them with evil intentions in that place. But that person could cover himself and not even the Mokomoko could see him. And therefore, Danora decided to call Yogiri and wake him up. However, in Yogiri's dream, he then had a flashback about his childhood with a woman in his dream. And after that, Yogiri woke up and said he would immediately go to Danora's room. At that time, Yogiri used his detection ability and realized that there was someone there. The person who was hiding was none other than Erica. And after that, Yogiri then used his power, which made Erica most likely already dead. After that, Yogiri explained to Danora that there was something wrong in this place because previously the enemy who was on assignment had intended to attack Danora. At that time, Danora was confused about why she was being targeted. On the other hand, Tachibana, who saw Erika's signal disappear, became confused about what had actually happened to Erika. Yogiri was with Danora, who intended to escape from that place. While they were discussing, Yogiri wondered why Danora could act so calm, But actually, Danora was not that calm. He's still scared, but he's starting to get used to it. Then we are flashed with Tachibana's battle against something, and the battle against a level 100 monster takes place in that place. It seemed like Tachibana could win decisively against the monster. Even after the monster was defeated, Tachibana then bound the monster as his slave. And after that, Tachibana became increasingly curious about Erika's condition and saw the appearance seen by Erika, who suddenly fainted at that place. As an assassin, it should be impossible for Erika to be killed that easily, so it's possible that something went wrong in that place. Euphemia then explained to Tachibana the possibility that Erika felt jealous of the woman named Danora and intended to get rid of her or take her to Mr. Tachibana. Tachibana, who heard that, was also shocked, because apparently slaves could also do things that were detrimental to him. Because it was related to a personal matter, Tachibana felt annoyed that if it was true, Danora might run away from him. Then at that time, he ordered Riza and Chelsea to immediately look for Danora and secure her. The scene then shifts to showing Len's battle, which even though it has been attacked many times, the creature can also recover very quickly. Even the darkness is still moving without stopping at all, even though it is fighting a sage. On the other hand, Yogiri and Danora, who were intending to escape at that time, were suddenly intercepted by Riza. She then sealed them both to take them immediately to Yuki Tachibana. However, when Yogiri touched it, the protector suddenly shattered, which made Riza scared. Even Riza's follow-up attack was stopped, and at that time Yogiri killed the stick used by Riza so that it could no longer release any more power. At that time, Riza was afraid because Yogiri could kill whatever he said, and therefore she was willing to answer all of Yogiri's questions. However, because Yogiri was too smart, he asked Riza where she had hidden another stick, and because of that, Riza brought out a stick from an unexpected place. At that time, Yogiri also asked Riza what about the others, whether they were also ordered to do the same thing as him. But unexpectedly, another slave from Tachibana arrived who was already above Yogiri and Danora. But strangely, with extraordinary alacrity, Danora was suddenly able to slam the body with a martial arts technique that he had never even learned. Seeing this, Moko felt that Danorayu's talent had finally emerged. However, it turned out that what Danora was slamming at that time was actually a puppet army of one of Tachibana's slaves. It is possible that the doll is Chelsea's power. It is also known that Riza still has another stick hidden in her ear, and when he intended to launch an attack on Yogiri, Yogiri immediately killed Riza on the spot.
これだけです。で、高藤君もまじまじと見ない。
今から壇ノ浦さんを連れ。
同じ命令を受け。
壇ノ浦さん。
お、野浦流の才能が深い。何これ。で一人で事足りると思って。
Chelsea, who was controlling all the dolls, then ordered all her troops to immediately detain them both. But suddenly, all of his puppet troops died instantly at that place, which made Chelsea even more afraid and even wanted to cry. This also did not apply to the puppets next to him. All of his puppet troops had apparently perished as a result of Yogiri's powerful attack, which killed him instantly. And after that, Yogiri appeared right in front of her, which made Chelsea cry and beg her not to harm or hurt her puppet troops. This made Yogiri and Danora feel that they were bad people, and the situation was reversed. The scene then shows Tachibana again. The shocked Tachibana says that Riza is dead. Chelsea even loses her will to fight and gives all the information to Yogiri and Danora. At that time, Tachibana said to Euphemia that Yogiri could kill whatever he thought of. Euphemia, who heard that, was also shocked. While they were on their way, they suddenly saw a large army of insects intending to attack them. But when he wanted to be killed instantly, Yogiri said that the flying cockroach could fall right on Danora's head, and he immediately became scared. At that time, Danora became angry with Tachibana, and because of that, they just passed by the group of cockroaches. But on the other hand, Tachibana, who saw all this, felt happy, thinking that it was impossible for Yogiri's abilities to be used when he was surrounded. He thought that this was Yogiri's weakness. In fact, at that time, Euphemia told Tachibana not to chase an enemy whose strength was still unknown. But Tachibana didn't listen to Euphemia's advice and still wouldn't back down. Just then, Tachibana then asked the cockroach troops to kill Yogiri. Yogiri, who saw that, also realized that everyone was looking for an opportunity to kill him. And for that reason, Yogiri said to Danora that he would kill Tachibana. If everything went as he planned, it wouldn't be difficult to use. Even though Yogiri did not see Tachibana's whereabouts, he then concentrated and killed Tachibana through the summon of the cockroach monster. And at that moment, Tachibana immediately fell and died instantly.
Takatou Yogiri 殺せ
Takatou-kun! にたかられるとか死ねるし。
淡々と狙ってるって感じ。橘勇気を殺そうの考えてる通りなら大元へ繋がった。橘勇気死ね。
But it turns out that even though Tachibana is dead, the cockroach army is still not dead. Yogiri then said that perhaps because of Tachibana's death, the cockroach troops were starting to get out of control, which made Danora even more panicked. On the other hand, Stephanie, who at that time had tried to cure Tachibana, still couldn't cure him. Because she was free from Euphemia's control, she immediately left the place and was really surprised to see a large shadow in that place. Even then, another sage appeared on the scene and asked Euphemia whence she had appeared. And at that time, Len intended to control all the information that Euphemia had by making her his follower. The scene then returns to showing Yogiri and Danora, who are confused when they see the commotion that is happening in the city, and you can see that many zombies have gathered there. Danora, who saw all this, shouted in annoyance, "Why is the world in Isekai suddenly having so many zombie attacks all over the place?" And episode 3 ends here. This is part 4 of my recap on my instant death ability is so overpowered. You can watch the previous parts with the link in the description below at the end of the last episode. This anime opens with Len, who at that time was curious about Yogiri's powers. Len also wanted to know what things Yogiri couldn't do. At that time, Len asked Euphemia for all the information. The one thing that made Len most curious was that he wanted to know whether Yogiri was also able to kill him. The scene then shifts to Yogiri and Danora in the city center. They are still confused about why the city center is suddenly filled with zombies. But on the other hand, we are shown a man named Ryota, who at that time protested to Masayuki because previously another sage had given the authority of this city to Ryota. Because of this, Ryota felt annoyed because Masayuki was doing whatever he wanted in his city. Ryota then asked Masayuki to withdraw his undead troops from the city. However, when Masayuki said that this was an order from Len, at that time, he was really surprised that Masayuki even asked for the key to the city. After getting the key, Masayuki then immediately stopped the movement of the zombies and let broadcasts appear throughout the place to explain to the remaining humans. Masayuki explained to them to look for figures named Yogiri and Danora. He asked them to bring those two people. Otherwise, Masayuki would mobilize the zombies again to attack local residents. Ryota, who saw this, all felt annoyed, because all this time he had had difficulty developing the city of Hanabusa, but instead everything was destroyed this easily. Yogiri and Danora were at that time being sought by everyone, even though Danora and Yogiri at that time didn't know why they were being sought like this. But Yogiri thought it was probably because he had previously killed a sage. Suddenly, they were surrounded by residents in that place. Yogiri had previously warned them. If they wanted to kill and make things difficult for Yogiri, he would immediately kill them on the spot. But they still didn't pay attention to Yogiri's words, because at that time they came with the intention of killing. Yogiri then immediately killed one of the residents.
日より厄介かも。私たち追われてるわけ？
まあ、賢者を殺しちゃったしな。これはこれで面倒だな。
いたぞー！うわっ！殺すな！がない！急げ！俺がやってやる！
つもりで近づいてくるのにってけしかけてきているのか。あいつと直接交渉できるのか。
But at that time, Yogiri began to feel annoyed with Masayuki and intended to meet him in the town square. Not long after, Yogiri then came to Masayuki and asked him why he was looking for them. Masayuki, who saw their presence, felt annoyed because he thought they were sacrificing themselves for the other residents. However, the reason Yogiri came to that place was because he wanted to kill Masayuki. At that time, Masayuki ordered his undead troops to immediately arrest Yogiri and Danora. And at that time, they all immediately moved towards Yogiri. Initially, Masayuki thought that it was impossible for Yogiri to kill a dead figure. But not long after that, as usual, all the figures he summoned died instantly. Seeing that, Masayuki felt very surprised and annoyed with Yogiri. Then Yogiri explained to Masayuki that he could determine their life and death. So if they can still move, it means they will be considered alive, but if they remain still, they will be considered dead. So the concept of death and life does not apply to Yogiri. However, Masayuki, who saw that, still didn't believe that instant death magic really existed. and therefore he immediately intended to enter combat mode. But when Yogiri told him to die, Masayuki immediately fell on that spot. After that, Yogiri talked to Ryota about many things. Ryota also explained to Yogiri that it seemed like a sage named Len was targeting the two of them. Even at that place, Mokomoko and Yogiri were starting to feel something was wrong. It seemed like someone was watching them from a distance, and strangely, Yogiri suddenly felt extraordinary killing intent from the residents in that place. When Ryota wanted to stop all of that, he still didn't. He then came to the conclusion that it seemed like Len was controlling everyone inside the barrier, and it turned out that it was true that from a distance he could see Len controlling everything, accompanied by Euphemia, who was there. At that time, Len asked Euphemia how high her strength really was. In your opinion, Euphemia at that time answered that it was possible that Yogiri was above a sage. Euphemia even told Len not to deal with Yogiri because it would be very dangerous even though Len was a sage. But at that time, Len was still curious about Yogiri's strength, especially when he saw Euphemia, who was very worried about him, even though Len was none other than a sage. The scene then changes to show Yogiri and Danora. At that time, Danora asks whether Yogiri can repeat the Tachibana case. However, Yogiri explained that this time, it was different from Tachibana's previous attitude, so it would probably be difficult to do, and therefore what he could do was kill everyone who at that time intended to kill him.
こんな感じのことは前試されてるみたいだ。どうにでもできるんだけど試してくる奴はいた。
At that time, Yogiri felt very annoyed because he knew that his enemy was testing his strength, even though in fact Yogiri's strength had no limits. Seeing Ryota, who was very sad at that time, Yogiri advised Ryota to move from that place. On the other hand, a dark shadow could be seen which was starting to approach the city of Hanabusa. Len even intends to test Yogiri's strength through a dark shadow that he himself cannot defeat. Len also divides his consciousness into two, which means that if Len's real body burns or his body disappears, he can restore his body with his clone. At that time, Len also ordered his clones to increase their numbers. At Yogiri's place, he began to realize that there was a very big danger in that place, and at that time a dark aggressor arrived at that place. Seeing this, Yogiri and the others were very surprised. On the other hand, Len was seen who at that time ordered all his clones to move immediately. When he saw the dark shadow, he either died or was still acting as usual. On the other hand, actually Yogiri could have killed the shadow, but for some reason Yogiri felt there was something strange in that place. However, because there was no other choice, in the end Yogiri killed the dark shadow. And sure enough, suddenly the oddity that Yogiri felt was true, and at that time a meteor continued to fall in that place, possibly none other than a clone of the sage Len. Yogiri, who saw this, panicked and asked everyone who was there to immediately lower his head. Yogiri was so panicked at that time that he hugged Danora because he was afraid that something would happen to her. Ryuta, who saw the intimacy between the two of them, was immediately annoyed and asked Yogiri to immediately stop all this chaos.
死ね
暗闇は殺した。
何？高藤くん。もう大丈夫だし。
ハリウッド映画よろしく抱き合ってな。
しろって言われてもな。
And strangely, the only person who can see the figure behind the red laser is Danora. Danora also mentioned the characteristics of Len, which made Ryuta really surprised at that time. At that time, Yogiri couldn't kill Len because he wasn't targeting him. But Ryuta, who heard that, asked Yogiri if Len was targeting Yogiri if he could kill him. And because of that, the plan was immediately carried out by the three of them. At that time, Ryuta told Yuri everything about the attack pattern of the sage Len, and after that they acted together. Meanwhile, Len was confident in his abilities at that time, but it turned out that something was not in line with Len's wishes. Suddenly, Len's figure was seen falling towards Yogiri, and Yogiri asked him to die. At that time, Mokomoko immediately created a barrier in that place to prevent attacks from the remaining sage Len. It turned out that the barrier created by Mokomoko was a gift from the previous aggressor. On the other hand, we are starting to be shown all of Len's clones, which at that time died instantly in that place. At that time, Len was also very surprised because his immortal army could die because it was made by Yogiri. When Len wanted to try something else, he suddenly felt strange because his main body in Len's dimension had died. And because of that, Len immediately fell there. But before Len got to the bottom, he said that this was his goal. He wanted to save the girl. And after that, Len's figure immediately disappeared in that place. However, after the figure disappeared, we were then shown a woman who opened her eyes, although we were not told whether it was Len or not.
不死身の吸血鬼がこれは一体プレートから作られたゆえには少しずつ設すべきではなかったのです。次元にいる本体が
The scene then shifts, showing the little girl. The little girl who had just woken up wondered if she was like a vampire in this place. And at that time, when the girl took out something in her arms, a hologram of Sage Len appeared which said, if she watches this recording, it means that Sage Len's plan has succeeded. In other words, Len really died. And because of Len's death, the girl managed to live in this place. And at that time, Len explained to the girl that the girl was none other than Len herself. She was a clone created from Len's body. But even so, the girl is also said to be a different individual from Len because she did not inherit any memories about Len. Because that was the only way to avoid the power of the Yogiri. Hearing that, the girl was really shocked. The scene then moves to the city center. Ryuta is seen saying his thanks to Danora. But Danora says that even so, they have killed the Sage Len. Fortunately, Ryo doesn't pay attention to that. After that, Yogiri and Danora left the city. Then we are shown Yogiri and Danora's friends, who at that time were practicing to face a very terrible monster that was in that place. They managed to get through everything very easily. But when a woman named Ryoko returned, she was surprised by someone named Carol who suddenly got her cell phone. And when Ryoko asked where she got it, Carol said that she took it secretly. And it turned out that Carol's goal was none other than to keep an eye on Yogiri too. Suddenly, Ryoko was shocked by the notification on her cell phone that the first gate had opened. And episode 4 ends here. Thank you so much for staying on this channel and watching our videos. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel so we can keep you up to date with our latest content. See you in the next video.